Welcome to the End-to-End Cloud Security webinar presented by Netskope, CrowdStrike, Okta, and Tevora. This is Clayton Ryness with Tevora. I am a principal consultant here, and what I'm going to do really is step through a little bit about Tevora briefly, talk about the problems that we see in the cloud with our clients, and really relate it back to some real-world experiences that we have, and then you'll be hearing individually from each of our partners and how their solutions can all integrate and really help solve this cloud security issue that we're having. So before we get into the details, I do want to thank those participants here, over half of which donated their $25 Uber Eats gift card to Feeding America. So Feeding America is a United States-based nonprofit organization that's a nationwide network of more than 200 food banks that feed more than 46 million people through food pantries, soup kitchens, shelters, and other community-based agencies. So thank you those that chose to support that cause. So getting right into it here, Tevora, we're a management services consulting organization really around cybersecurity. Really covers the full spectrum of information security from enterprise risk, compliance, and my practice areas really oversee a couple of our more technical pieces, which is the penetration testing, all the ethical hacking that we do, incident response, solution integration, including what we do with partners like today, and cloud security. So we've been around since 2003, got about 130 employees, clients in just about every vertical. We have accreditations of all sorts of ways. We do a lot of SOC 2 work, a lot of ISO, A2LA accredited, HIPAA, high trust. We do a lot of PCI. I've been doing PCI since the beginning. So very proud of the diverse customer set that we've got here, really been able to carve out a niche in all verticals. So we've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly. We have clients that are high sophistication, high spend, low sophistication, low spend, and everyone's got some level of information security need that we've been able to meet. Most importantly for this discussion here today is really what we see as being some of the key issues when in the cloud. So everyone's got some kind of cloud footprint. It's either a cloud first strategy or someone's dabbling, or the devs are kind of running their own game and suddenly this thing becomes production. So, or anywhere in between. And some of the key things is identity management, right? How are you doing authentication and authorization into the cloud? How are you enforcing authorization policies? How are you doing incident response? People are used to the traditional on-prem or VM-based IR where you're dumping memory and so forth. How does it actually work in the cloud, and are you prepared to do that? How do you really interoperate with on-prem? You have a solution stack on-prem or in a data center colo. How does that work? And is it going to be different when you move into the cloud? Can you use the same tool sets or not? And rights management, who has access to what, right? The fine-grained access control, the provisioning, and really having a way of doing it based on the risk posed by how certain workloads are organized. The big thing also is anomaly detection, just visibility into what's happening. You can use some of those cloud native tools, but obviously if you roll it into a tool set that you're more comfortable with, that you already had deployed in your SOC, that would be obviously more beneficial. And the big thing, the last thing here is really configuration enforcement. Not knowing just what happened, but being able to enforce those things as they happen in the cloud are some key issues. So think about that as we're going through some of this discussion here. I'm really encouraged to work with these three partners specifically because you don't often get a good level of interoperability between tools. We get asked that quite a bit. So this story, from my perspective, it was very interesting and compelling to work with. So with that, I will hand it over to Paul Williams at Okta, and he will step you through his portion.
Thanks, Clayton. Okay. Just to confirm, are you seeing my
Looks
screen?
good.
Terrific. I want to thank Tevora and Clayton for the introduction and for having us here. I think this is a really important time to talk about the way that vendors in this space work together, and the Okta, Netskope, and CrowdStrike partnership is a great place to start. So I'd like to start very quickly by telling you about who Okta is, because I think it's important to how we fit in this space and how we partner with Netskope, CrowdStrike, and Tevora. We've been around since 2009. We've been on the NASDAQ since 2017. We have more than 8,000 customers, which amazingly translates to more than 10 million daily users. Importantly, we're getting close to 7,000 pre-built integrations. Those integrations are to things like applications that users might need to authenticate to, but they're also integrations to things like security solutions. And that's where today's conversation comes in. And this has been recognized in the industry through the Gartner Magic Quadrant and also through Forrester. And the question is, why do millions of people use Okta every day? And the reason is that there's a fundamental transformation going on, and that transformation starts with identity. We think about security the way it used to be, where we started with where people were or what zone they were in, and that's changed to starting with who somebody is and sharing that identity throughout the enterprise, whether it's cloud applications, on-prem applications, or other security solutions, so that the appropriate access can be granted with the appropriate level of security. I mentioned that Gartner has recognized us. Just a little commercial. We are way up at the top of the Magic Quadrant, and we've been moving up every year. The reason is that we listen every year, and we listen to our customers, we listen to Gartner, Gartner listens to our customers, and we come back and we make the product better. This past year, that meant a lot of work in securing partner applications, in securing on-prem applications, and in making the use case seamless for end users, no matter what kind of device they're on and where the application that they're trying to access is. So I have to talk a little bit about the universe of applications, because this is going to, and the universe of what Okta's Identity Cloud provides, because this is going to tie into how we connect to Netscope and CrowdStrike. So if you think over on the left, this is what a lot of customers think of first with Okta. We started out as single sign-on, solving that problem of users having a lot of different passwords, not knowing how to get to different applications. We solved that a long time ago, and we started building out more things like adaptive multi-factor authentication. This takes the idea of MFA and says, we shouldn't have one-size-fits-all multi-factor authentication. Our multi-factor authentication should differ depending upon what we learned from Netscope, what we learned from CrowdStrike, based upon where a user is, what type of device they're on, what type of application they're trying to use. That means that we might simplify things. We think about security, and the traditional view of security is that when you make things more secure, you make them harder for end users. Let's turn that around and make things easier by enabling things like passwordless authentication, where a user who's, say, on-prem might be able to use just a fingerprint or Windows Hello in their face to authenticate. But if they try to access some very secure location or application, they may be prompted for something more. Then next is lifecycle management. As we allow users to access applications, it's really important that we pass attributes from one application to another, that we provision user identities and licenses to downstream applications and to Active Directory. Universal Directory is the magic that makes this work. Universal Directory is an extensible cloud meta directory so that you can connect to business partners, to multiple AD stores, to normalize those in the cloud. And then Access Gateway and Advanced Server Access for those on-prem use cases with more traditional authentication, or SSH and RDP access. And then, of course, API access management for the full OAuth 2.0, OpenID Connect, machine to machine, and the developer SDKs that enable developers to simply build this into their app. So whether it's an app that you build for your workforce or for your customers, that Okta can do the authentication. And we empower this for some of the largest enterprises out there, not just for their workforce, but for their customers to authenticate as well. This needs to work for the broad variety of devices that people use, and for bring your own device and bring your own identity architecture as well. So we should be able to accept other forms of identity, be they federated identity, another Active Directory, another HR system, or somebody bringing a social identity. And we should accept that based upon policy from any type of device and be able to differentiate between those devices, pass that information along to the connected systems, and allow the security, the richness that you get from that enhanced context. And so I mentioned this is one solution for customer identity, partner identity, workforce identity. We have a single solution, and it allows the flexibility of our tools to be used for any of a customer's customers, a customer's employees, or their business partners in a flexible way so that we can make resources available as needed to all of those different stakeholders. And then we connect those customers again to those resources. Stepping back a little bit under the covers, I wanted to talk more about our universal directory and the way that it enables access across resources. So if we look at the left, we have sources of identity on the left. The holy grail for a lot of enterprises is to get identity from an HR system, enrich that identity with attributes that we might get from another system, like maybe group memberships from Office 365, and populate those downstream to other applications. By doing that, we can use something like somebody's role from HR to decide which access they get to applications and which licenses we assign to those applications. And also to populate that to an Active Directory. So there's a single source of truth that pervades throughout the enterprise and is usable by any applications that should use those sources of truth. We've extended that this year for the first time with our workflow engine that adds tremendous flexibility in how we do that provisioning. So we can trigger flows based upon events inside of Okta or inside of another cloud service that's connected by an API or on a schedule. We have a pre-built library of connectors, a rich library of functions, and we can take and compose things that we get from these different systems and chain flows and iterate. So if you want to have a user get a unique email address, a Slack message to be created, a group to be created inside of Office 365. All of those things can be automated based upon our rules without writing any code. It's a simple, logical drag and drop creation mechanism. So I'd like to build out our whole zero trust reference architecture and talk more about how these partners fit in now that we've built out what Okta does for you. And I start up in the upper left with identity. We get user identity, which is where Okta starts. And that user identity may come just from Universal Directory inside of Okta, but it may also integrate third-party integrations, federated identity, MFA. We can add device identity to that. And then we apply policies. We score based on risk. We apply policy, we authorize, all with third-party context. And this is where Netscope and CrowdStrike come in, giving us context about an application, context about a device, that we can use to dynamically provide access based upon what we learn from our partners in security. And then we feed all this into the analytics engines and also get context from analytics engines like a SIEM. And then this allows us to provide access to all the different types of resources that a user might need access to, whether it's SAML or WS-Fed integration, OAuth, SSH, and RDP. Drilling down then into the specific integrations we have with some of the partners here today. and I'll let their engineers speak more about these specific integrations. But Netskope, as you probably know, is a leader in their space, and they provide us significant additional context. Okta is really good at knowing who a user is and what type of device they're on. Netskope can apply policy that goes to the application layer, looks at the data, looks at data loss prevention, applies threat prevention, and can use that information to signal back to Okta when there might need to be some additional multi-factor authentication, for example, or maybe a user shouldn't even be allowed onto an application at all based upon what we learned from Netskope. And then Netskope provides that additional control over the layers that they have control over. And then just another view of this contextual access management so that we can talk about the device context. As we look at app context and user context, and we start with things like, is this a new IP address? Is it a specified IP zone? Is there an anonymizer? Is it a country that's blocked? But we need to find out from the experts in device context more about the device and apply that in providing a contextual response. And the flow of that looks like this. When a user tries to get access to an application, they're redirected to Okta for identity. We can check on the management and security of a device and prompt for additional authentication as needed. So with that, I will hand it over to Netskope for the next part of the presentation and be available for questions at the end.
Awesome. Thanks, Paul. Okay, here we go. And everybody see the presentation here? Should be coming up in a second. There it is. All right.
Looks good.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So thanks, Paul. I appreciate that. I really like the comment you made that security should make it harder. It should make it easier. And I think that, you know, what Okta and CrowdStrike and Netskope do with the integrations that we have, and in fact, our just open architecture philosophy in general, really helps facilitate that for our customers. So awesome. Appreciate you going through that presentation. So real quick about Netskope. You know, since 2012, we've been helping organizations adopt the cloud, right? So we like to say confidently moving to the cloud. And we started out as a CASB, and while most organizations or a lot of our customers have, or not customers, but a lot of the industry has still thought of us as a CASB or Cloud Access Security Broker. We really expanded our platform over the last several years, so we're actually protecting, not just cloud-based applications through APIs, but we have a lot of, very robust real-time inline controls. And that actually covers not just cloud applications, but also websites. And the one thing that we know from our analysis, you can see that we process 50 billion transactions per day, so we have a lot of information about what's going on in the web. Excuse me. Is that today's websites really are cloud sites, right? Web applications today, they're basically formulated with JavaScript. They're using APIs. So understanding that is really, really important, and that's really where we've been focusing our time and attention. And you can see other stuff that we have, customers large and small. So Netskope is, relevant for the largest organizations. In fact, we secure the traffic for the largest organizations today, including the largest Office 365 environment. So, but why are customers really flocking to Netskope? And it's really because of the security platform that we have that allows us to, hang on just a second, sorry guys. It allows us to cover a lot of different aspects. Number one, of course, cloud applications, and then public cloud security. things like IaaS or AWS, Azure, GCP. But we've also branched into applying those real-time controls to today's websites. So there's also data protection. So we can now apply DLP controls to the different websites today, which really are basically, I like to call them cloud sites. And we do some pretty interesting things.
Dave, did we lose you? We're not hearing audio.
Oh, sorry. Am I back now?
Yes.
I apologize, guys. Okay. My bad. So today I want to focus on some of the open API architecture that we have that allows best-of-breed solutions to integrate. And so that's really what I'm going to focus on. But before I move on to that, what I want to do is talk about something that's really, really important in today's cloud security environment. And that is the idea of what we call extreme definition or full visibility. And to have full visibility of what's going on in today's cloud and web world, you have to understand how those applications are coded. You have to understand the APIs to drive the communication between applications, between web browsers and websites. You also have to understand the JSON, or the JavaScript object notation. And so that's a really, really key requirement for securing today's cloud environments. Cloud apps are not really designed with security as a top priority. So as an example, they use common URLs, which is great for convenience, but it's bad for security. And so why, you ask? Why aren't today's solutions, aren't they application aware? And I say, yes, well, they are. And they typically rely on the URL to identify the application. However, the approach can't really distinguish between your organization's sanctioned Office 365 OneDrive versus a partner's Office 365 environment, or even a personal, or even worse, malicious actors Office OneDrive environment. So to understand that, you have to have visibility that actually comes from the JSON. It comes from the APIs. And so, I'd like to say that bypass is not a security strategy. So bypassing all Office 365 traffic, okay, that is a strategy, and that's an allow strategy. The problem is that it allows everybody's instance. And so if you can't get to the instance that granular level, then it actually creates some issues. And obviously, creates a pretty large security gap. So, as technology advances, so must your security controls. Granular visibility and control, really, that is the critical factor in today's web and cloud world. So using our patented XD technology, we do several things. Number one is we're decrypting all the traffic. Now, that's not really something new, right? I mean, there are applications and services that can decrypt TLS and SSL traffic. But what is required is a lot of horsepower to do it. So if you've ever rolled out any of those solutions, that actually takes a lot of resources. And in fact, most of my customers I've worked with over the years have had moderate success in decrypting traffic, but not full success. So why do that yourself? Why not rely on Netscope and our fast network that we've built out over the last several years? Basically inserting hundreds of millions of dollars to build. And we've done that so you don't have to, right? So we provide that service, but once you have the ability to see the traffic and see the packets and the payloads, it's also important to understand that those things are actually embedded in APIs and JSON. So if you don't have the technology to understand that, you can't distinguish instances. You can't distinguish, you can't basically obtain granular visibility, or also enforce fine-grained control. So what do I mean by that? So let's follow the activities of one of our users, Kate. So Kate from accounting, she logs into her system. We know because Okta has passed us her identity information and credentials that she's from accounting. She is who she says she is, right? She may have done a multi-factor authentication to get into her system. And she's working remote, right? So we're location aware, and we understand that she's on a machine that's in a remote location. Well, today everybody's remote, so that's fine. and she's on her laptop. Well, is it her laptop? Is it a managed device? Is it running the CrowdStrike agent, as an example? Is it running a Netscope client? Does it have certain processes running, or are there certain files that are present? Right, so we can do a security posture check on her device and make sure that it is in fact something that is considered a managed device. Even if it's not managed, we can also apply different policies related to that. So if we know that she's on her laptop, she's going to access OneDrive. So the big question here is, are we allowing OneDrive? Or are we allowing just a specific instance of OneDrive? Or are we allowing all OneDrive, but we have other controls in the back end that say, okay, you can't move data from one to another. But in this case, we've determined that she's actually accessing the OneDrive that's sanctioned by the organization. And so that's good. So we have that instance awareness so we know which one it is. But we can also prevent her from moving data or clicking on a phishing email that might take her to a different OneDrive that's hosted by a malicious actor. Right? And so that instance awareness is really critical in today's cloud, because you want to enable your users in your business to have the benefits of the cloud without taking the security risk that also can come along with that. So next she's going to share. So she's going to share a file. Okay, now we need to know more, right? What's the full context of what she's going to share? And we see it's a financial file. Well, is she going to share this thing internally or externally? Right? And what is the file? So with our DLP service, we will actually see that this is a sensitive file that shouldn't be shared publicly yet, and not even privately yet, right? Because it could be earnings announcements that haven't been released. And so we can prevent her from doing something that she didn't really intend to do, perhaps, or if it's somebody who's a malicious internal actor, we can stop that action as well. So the key thing here is that complete visibility is important to protect the cloud, because as technology changes, the old security stack doesn't keep up with all of the different variables that you need, which is that granular visibility and that fine-grained control. So back to our integration topic. So our open architecture, and this is true with all of these vendors here today, it enables a solution-based approach. So it enables your organization to safely adopt the cloud, but also maintain the compliance and mitigate the risk. In the case of Okta, it's really providing that authentication, that single sign-on. The user group provision, right? That's a big benefit for us when we're setting up users. Also the federation, understanding who those users are across thousands of cloud applications. And then we extend that. And then the real-time threat exchange. So we have indicators of compromise that we can share with CrowdStrike. If something has been, a threat has been detected on an endpoint or on its way to an enterprise, CrowdStrike can send that information to us. If we happen to see it in the cloud first, we'll send it to CrowdStrike. At the end of the day, what it creates is a real-time, security, strong security posture, so that we're aware of the threats, whether they're coming from an endpoint or they're coming from a cloud application or even a website. And then optionally, you could also be using UABA or SOAR platform. We don't have a vendor on the call today talking about this, but this is also something that you can use to step up the automation process. So digital transformation, right? What is it? Right? What has happened is that as users have moved outside the corporate firewall, outside of the perimeter, if you will, it's created an inversion of the security stack. So users and data are the new perimeter. And so it's really important to protect the data assets wherever they are, which requires full visibility, right? It requires real-time granular controls and a coordinated approach across the cloud security stack, whether that is, obviously a cloud security platform like Netscope, identity platform like Okta, a strong next generation endpoint protection platform like CrowdStrike. So these are all important. And why is that important? It's because threat actors are pretty sophisticated today. They go where the users are. The users are moving to the cloud, so have they. Right? So we need that coordinated approach. And it also helps to simplify operational processes and make things easier for the administrators and security analysts. So let's talk in a little bit more detail about our integration with Okta. There's several key points here, but it's really about integrating across the entire identity lifecycle, right? From provisioning and deprovisioning the user. They make that job much easier for us. If a user leaves an organization, we can also take them out of the Netscope platform, right? So it automates that process. But also it's protecting users by steering them in a safe fashion. If a user is on an unmanaged device or a personal machine, they can still authenticate to the applications that your organization has authorized. And then Okta helps us do that because the IDP will kick over what I call a clientless or a reverse proxy type of a connection. And then using that clientless approach, now we have the ability to secure even those devices that might be personal devices or UID, et cetera. So that's a real big benefit. But also, one of the things that Okta does very well is federates the user. And they are aware of thousands of different cloud applications. Netscope, because we were born in the cloud, this is where we started, we actually can federate that across even more, up to 36,000 different cloud applications, websites, et cetera. So it extends that federation to the vast array of applications that users would use them, from within an organization today. But also continuously validating, and if needed, enforcing stricter policy-based controls. So when anomalies are detected, say a user has logged in to a machine in California, but now all of a sudden they're showing up in Singapore. Well, that's probably not a legitimate login, right? So there could have been a compromised credential there. Right? So then we can force step-up authentication, step-up multi-factor, which Paul described. On the integration between Netscope and CrowdStrike, it's really about visibility into the threat landscape, right? So seeing threats that are targeting the cloud or sourced from the cloud, and CrowdStrike sees endpoint targeted threats and those that are sourced or destined to an enterprise, right? So that the ability to share that information so that we have real-time forensic sharing and then ultimately reduce the risk is really important, including device classification, ensuring that unprotected assets can only engage in low-risk activities. So as we bring those together, one of the things that we use is our Cloud Threat Exchange. So this allows us to bring in IOC sharing from different platforms, and so CrowdStrike is one of our best and first, and so it really helps reduce that whole attack surface. Right? So that zero-day prevention, because we have the intelligence between both, right? We can share those indicators of compromise between the two solutions. So let's take a step how this all comes together using a couple of use cases. So imagine Sally. She's working from home. She wants to access Salesforce from a corporate laptop. We know that she's running the Netscope steering client, and the endpoint protection is running on her endpoint, which is CrowdStrike. Right, so we know a little bit about her device, and she wants to access the cloud. She wants to get to Salesforce. Well, so Okta sits here and does the authentication of Sally and gives her access into Salesforce. But one of the things it also does after it authorizes her is then it moves it over to Netscope. So transparently to Sally, her session traffic is being steered through Netscope. So it gives us visibility into several key aspects. Number one, who she is, right? So we have some information. So we are identity aware, but we're not an identity provider. So we have some information about Sally, but we get a lot more information because of what Okta provides. But we also know how she's accessing the application. And we know that she's coming from a managed endpoint. It's running the CrowdStrike agent, in that she's trying to access Salesforce. So as she accesses this, we have a lot of really good green flags here. And so based on that context, we can enable full protected access to Salesforce. But if something changes, right? Let's say that there is some kind of an anomaly that we detect. Well, then we would potentially, force a step-up authentication, and Okta would do that for us. Or we could put her into a risky users group, right, and take other controls and ways of protecting, number one, your data and your users, and maybe Sally's not even the real user here, right? And then optionally, you could use the SOAR platform to even further automate some of these steps. But let's take a situation where she's unexpectedly forced to work from home. She doesn't have her issued laptop. She's using a personal laptop or device. In this case, as you would expect, it's not necessarily going to be running the same grade of endpoint protection that you would get on a managed device where they're running something like a CrowdStrike, right? Maybe she has no AV running at all. We don't know. I mean, that's the truth, is we just don't know. Maybe it's a compromised laptop, but the point is, it's her device. We don't have a lot of information about that. So how do we handle that? Well, she still needs to do her work. She still wants to access Salesforce. And so now, with an unmanaged device scenario, Salesforce sees that Okta is the IDP. So it will actually authenticate her But it also knows that Netscope is in the mix for visibility and steering the traffic, right? So we can safely enable her to work without, running into cloud malware, et cetera. And so in this case, Okta is going to redirect to Netscope, and then we set up that reverse proxy clientless relationship. And again, we understand who she is. We understand how she accessed the application, but we also know that she's not running the CrowdStrike agent, and that she's accessing, Salesforce, of course. But since the agent's not running, now we would create a different contextual policy that says, allow her read-only access to Salesforce. Or we might say, allow her to have access, but not allow her to download files, because we don't want sensitive data going to an unknown device. Or we could say, because we don't know if she's running a robust next generation AV platform, and endpoint security platform, maybe, we don't want her to upload files either, right? And so all of those contextual decisions you can make with that granular visibility and that granular control. So just some examples of benefits of this end-to-end integration between best-of-breed solutions. Number one is leveraging Okta's IAM platform with Netscope, so we can federate across thousands of cloud applications. The real-time security enforcement, the data protection from both managed and unmanaged endpoints. Bilateral sharing of indicators of compromise, forensics data between Netscope and CrowdStrike. Right? So we can reduce that attack surface against zero-day threats. Another is orchestrating just security adaptation, right? Changes based upon user behavior or discovered threats, right? Changing that stuff in real time. And then optionally, you can leverage a security orchestration automation response or SOAR platform to further automate your controls. So there's a lot of ways that we work together well. And in the world of advancing the move to the cloud, it's really important to understand some of the key things and some of the security risks. And the Tevora team could certainly help you with that. And today we didn't cover a whole lot about Netscope, kind of hitting the highlights of some of the integrations. But if you want to know more, certainly reach out to your Tevora team. And with that, I will pass the baton over to Dan at CrowdStrike.
Thank you, Dave. So here at CrowdStrike, we protect endpoints, and more importantly, we protect workloads, regardless of where those workloads sit and where the devices are and where they may go to. So there's really, 7 questions we have to address when we go to protect these endpoints. A major one is, how do you maintain visibility into that endpoint, regardless of where it is and where it may go to, whether it's at someone's house, or it's going to move to a Starbucks and then to an office, or if it's sitting in the cloud, or it doesn't matter where it is. How do we maintain visibility wherever it is and wherever it moves to? And then how do we keep things up to date with that endpoint as well? Not only protection, but the implementation and configuration of that endpoint solution as well. But then more importantly, is how do we triage alerts, respond to them, and remediate them when those endpoints may not be on-prem and may be moving around? So this is how we address it with the Falcon platform. And lots of the pieces here address what I was just talking about. Specifically, Insight is our EDR module that gives us visibility into the endpoint, regardless of where it is. It's an always-on, 24/7 streaming EDR solution that always sends telemetry up to the cloud. So it doesn't matter if we see when we see a detection, we always have the context around that. We don't have to pull anything from the endpoint. We're not getting a snapshot in time where maybe it's just 15 minutes before and 15 minutes after. We're not doing large data dumps trying to pull that data from the endpoint, since it's always streaming. So a detection triggers, right away we have that additional context needed to find out what's going on with that detection, whether it's 15 minutes before or 10 days before. It doesn't matter, since that's always on. Also, with the visibility piece, we have a firewall management module as well, so we can see what's happening on the endpoint from a network perspective, and what connections are actually coming in and out of that endpoint. And protection-wise, we have our next-gen antivirus piece, which is called Falcon Prevent, and that gives us a signature-less protection mechanism that sits on the endpoint. So we do it two ways. We have what's called lightning queries, which we leverage the power of the cloud to do machine learning and some hash lookups and things like that. But if for some reason the cloud's not available or it's sluggish, we don't want to interrupt that user in their daily activities. So we actually have a copy of that machine learning on the endpoint as well that acts just the same way as the cloud. So it'll default to that if for some reason, as I said, the cloud is not there or taking too long. So we're able to always prevent or protect those endpoints, regardless of if they're still streaming to the cloud and have connectivity or not. Another aspect of that protection is the device control module. So we're allowed to look at USB devices and set policy there, whether it's read-only, read and write, certain devices, a certain model that's issued by the company. We're able to lock down those USB ports and understand and have visibility of what's coming in and out of those. Also, we have some other services that build on top of that. So we're getting all this telemetry up to the cloud. We have all this visibility, and we get to the last piece of how do we find out what's going on, and that's part of our Overwatch service. So we're using this giant data lake. I'll talk more about it in the next slide here, but we're using this giant data lake where we get all this telemetry from all these endpoints to actively hunt it with our Overwatch team. So they're looking at all this data and finding and hunting and protecting our customers, regardless if they're big or small. They don't know where that's coming from until it actually comes down to notifying the customer, giving them an idea of what they saw in the environment and sending them that report that gives them all the context and visibility around what they found when they're actively hunting in that data lake. But also with visibility, we have our two pieces called Spotlight and Discover, and those are IT hygiene and vulnerability management. So as we're sitting on this endpoint and streaming things to the cloud, we're seeing everything that's going on. So we're collecting things like when the last time the user changed their password, when the last time they logged in, what applications they're using. So we can capture all that and send it to the cloud as well with that IT hygiene Discover piece. But more importantly, with all these applications, since we see all the hashes of them, we're able to correlate that to a database to find out which version of Java is actually running on that machine and therefore what it's vulnerable to. So we can manage that and use a vulnerability management solution to actually patch and harden those endpoints. Also with this is when it comes to actually protecting and hunting and on your worst day where that 0.001% something comes through and isn't blocked, how do you get visibility into who that is and what they might be doing? And that's where the intel piece comes in. So we have world-renowned threat intel that actually provides additional context to those detections as they trigger off. That's automatically pulled from the threat intel and attributed to those detections. But if you have any kind of people that analyze malware on your team, we also have tools for them as well with Sandbox and Malquery. But then all this comes down to the last question now is now that we have visibility and we're able to keep things up to date and we're able to not have to worry about managing the solution because it's all in the cloud, so updates are done automatically and automated. How do we remediate if there is something that's going on? And that's where either your team or our team come in with the Falcon Complete solution, where we can actually remediate based off of rules of engagement playbook on your behalf. So if it's someone in sales that has an infection, the rules of engagement say you have free will to quarantine that machine or do what you have to do to clean it up. We'll go ahead and do that. Or if it's something like in a data center where you want us to work with your team on the remediation because it's mission critical, we can do that as well. And all of this is in the whole picture security-wise, and that's where our APIs and our CrowdStrike store come in. So we have tons of APIs that are open and feature-rich that allow us to do integrations with the likes of like Okta and Netscope. But we also have what's called the CrowdStrike store, which leverages our agent, our lightweight agent that's never more than 32 megs, never uses more than 1% CPU, sits across all platforms, whether it's Windows, Linux, Mac, mobile, in the cloud, AWS, Google, private containers, private cloud. Regardless where it is, they can leverage our agent to provide that solution. So in the case of something like UEBA, where it's not something that CrowdStrike does, we partner with someone in the store that will use the same agent and just provide that UEBA solution across that cloud data lake. So since we have this lightweight agent that's automatically pushed down the cloud, it does not require a restart. So it's easy to update things and push it out to new machines. And that's always on, easy to manage. So now we can actually focus on, and I'll get to this in a little bit more in a few slides, but now we can focus more on those last three questions of how do I find something, understand what's going on, and remediate if need be. So we have all these things coming, all these data points, telemetry streaming to the cloud all the time, which makes it easier to go through. Like I said, you don't have to wait on snapshots in time. You don't have to try and pull data from that endpoint to get a better idea on the context you need to do an investigation. It's always on, it's always in that cloud console. So we're able to investigate faster and do active hunting, which is what we need to be doing to find that 0.001% and find out what's going on that comes through, since there's no silver bullet to stop absolutely everything. So this allows us to, with all that data coming in and moving away from having to update signatures and maintain solutions and worry about change management windows so you can actually update, agents and things like that. This is what allows us to get down to this 1-10-60 methodology, where we can start to detect in 1 minute, understand what's going on with that detection within 10, and actually respond and possibly remediate if need be that incident within 60 minutes. So back to what I was saying earlier of this, the power of Falcon and the cloud allows us to focus less time on what's happening at the top and more at the bottom. So we can take a picture of what's something like here, where you may need one person to enable or make sure signatures are up to date, and a couple people that need to worry about the implementation, the configuration, and tuning of an endpoint solution, and another couple people to worry about managing it and maintaining it. And then even more people that have to worry about triaging and responding and remediating. Well, with CrowdStrike, we can get more towards this picture, where your team is focusing more on the bottom, where they're actually triaging, responding, and remediating and doing it quicker, rather than spending a lot of time at the top of this, where they're worrying about signatures and being up to date and configuration and things like that. And you don't have to take my word for it. Everything that we do here at CrowdStrike, we're a firm believer in third-party analysts and tests. So we participate in everything that we possibly can, and they all are able to verify that what we say and do is repeatable in any kind of environment, whether it's big or small and different types. They're able to replicate what we do, and that's why we score so well in things like Gartner and on AV comparatives and so on. So with that, hopefully you get a better idea on how we address these questions. As far as visibility, I talked about that always on EDR, cloud native EDR that streams telemetry to the cloud all the time. So you never have missing pieces to the puzzle during an investigation. And then with that agent that we push out, that's only 32 megs and connects back to the cloud. We don't have to worry about updating the signatures, since it's using that machine learning on the sensor and in the cloud. And then we don't have to worry about deployment, since we can push this out to tens of thousands of devices in an afternoon and start getting visibility pretty much instantly, since we don't have to worry about restarts after we push those agents out. And then since it's all cloud native, we don't have to worry about supporting and managing and maintaining it nearly as much as with a traditional solution, since we do all that for you with Falcon in the cloud. Then most importantly, the last three pieces on how we're able to detect, provide contextual data around those detections, attribute any kind of intel that we have to those detections instantly. So then it makes the investigating and hunting a lot easier. And then most importantly, if it does come to a remediation, we don't have to worry about wiping or re-imaging machines at all. We're able to do all that remotely from anywhere, and again, does not require any kind of reboot. So that is all I had for you. I'm going to hand it back over to Clayton from Tevora.
Sounds great. Thank you, Dave. So we'll take questions here in a minute. So if you do have those, you can punch those in, raise your hand, what have you, into the chat here. But really just wanted to summarize that. Hopefully you've got a sense for how identity management can really come together here, give you that dynamic way to allocate access to resources in the cloud, the way you can protect your data as it goes up, even stuff that's in transit, not just DLP or REST, like solutions of old, and really be able to protect those endpoints and those workloads as they're operating in the cloud as well. The big thing that we see is just being ready to handle an incident. So if you don't have the visibility, you don't know what's happening in the cloud, you don't know where your files are, just think, I mean, are you able today to really get to a point where if there was an incident, you'd be able to triage, control, contain, and remove that threat? If the answer is no, then you may need to look a little deeper in how you're operating your environment. So we here at Tevora, we actually do use all these solutions. So we use Okta, we use Okta MFA, we use CrowdStrike Falcon Host on our endpoints. We use Netscope to protect files from our clients that go anywhere and protect them, make sure that they don't actually leave it appropriately. So we eat a lot of our own dog food here. So there are some questions that come up quite often. I'll pose this to Netscope specifically. You know, I do hear that SASE is a new CASB. I don't know if that came up explicitly on this talk, but I'd like to be able to address that. Is there comments we can have on SASE specifically?
Sure. Yeah. So you know that Secure Access Service Edge, or SASE, as Gartner likes to call it. You know, ultimately, I think what will happen is the CASB Magic Quadrant will become the SASE Magic Quadrant. But it's the convergence of the network security and network performance and networking. And so what we're seeing in the marketplace is, you know, as applications have moved to the cloud and network loads are really in the cloud, and they're in public cloud and they're in private clouds and hybrid clouds, it's really about moving the security stack into the cloud. So cloud native security that can also work with, you know, high performing networks, you know, such as edge networks. And this is one reason why Netscope, you know, from our inception, we've been building out, you know, very large private edge network with, you know, interconnects to, you know, all of the major carriers in the world, all the last mile providers, so that we can provide high performance, so that there's no longer this trade-off between, you know, security for the user and performance for the user. Right? You can give them the performance while you still have the security, visibility, and controls. And so, and that's really what SASE is about, and that's what Gartner is really kind of driving the vision towards. And it's a journey, right? It's probably going to take 10 years before, quote unquote, SASE becomes a real thing, because it's really an architectural decision, right? It's an architectural direction. But we're definitely in that boat, you know, with the motor at full speed. And I would submit that we are probably the furthest along in that journey of the vendors, but we still have things to do also, right? So we're continuing to come out with new solutions and enhance our networking posture, et cetera. So yeah, it's a good question.
Excellent, thanks for that. There's a question here about CrowdStrike Falcon Host and how it can cooperate or get along well with other endpoint solutions, and what kind of data gets sent to the cloud.
Yeah, so as I mentioned, we don't require a reboot, so we can absolutely play nice with any kind of other endpoint agents out there. There are some caveats with quarantine. We don't want to be fighting over files with a solution that does quarantine, so that may have to be turned off. But we can absolutely sit alongside any other endpoint solution there is and not require a reboot when doing so. And as far as data being sent to the cloud, it just has to do with telemetry data of, you know, processes and events. So things like the process ID, things like the file name are what's sent to the cloud, along with timestamps and what have you.
Great, thank you for that.
Thanks.
Yeah, sounds good. I don't think we have any more questions here. So on behalf of Paul, Dan, Dave, the Okta, CrowdStrike, Netscope, and Tevora team here, we appreciate you attending this webinar. Thank you.
Sure. Hey,